Nate, are you in?
I know, and
can you hear us?
It drives me crazy when I forget it.
Nate can't hear anything. Can you hear us now, Nate?
Oh, good.
Where is Nate? Is
Okay.
he on vacation?
All right. Welcome to the Provo City School District Board of Education study session. It is Tuesday, February 9th, 2021. And we will begin with a roll call, and we'll start with Stephanie.
Hey, Stephanie Bryant, Business Administrator.
Gina Hales, School Board Member.
Jennifer Partridge, Board Member.
Rebecca Nielsen, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board President.
Keith Ertel, Superintendent.
Mccabe Jensen, Board Member.
Terry Mccabe, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
All right. We will start with our construction update by Stephanie Bryant.
I'm going to go up there because it just seems more comfortable.
That's fine.
Okay. And I'll just stand up there for the whole rest of the meeting.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, well, first, I did get a chance to chat with Mark in person today, and he's slowly recuperating, so we wish him well. He wanted me to bring you up to date a little bit on a couple of things. I didn't send that to you, did I, Bonnie? Let me send it to you real quick. Timpview High School is still moving along nicely. The South Gym is still slated to be done by the end of March. And the bids for the remainder of the school are still slated for May. Let me see if I can get this. Well, we'll talk about it without it. One of the things that Mark's working through at Timpview High right now is speaking to the LDS Church Real Estate Group. There is an LDS Church kind of across the street and back in a neighborhood, just across from Timpview. He's talking to them about parking to see if they will allow us to use that facility for some parking for students. As we move through the phases of the design, the existing parking lot, a large piece of that will be left alone. We'll have that available for faculty. So he's trying to work through some options with what we might be able to do with some student parking.
I don't know if it's on the latest date, but that's April 1 this year that we close off a big chunk.
Yes, he did say that, yep. So come April, we're going to be strapped for some parking. He said initially the discussions are going well. They've got a few different levels of approval that they have to go through. He's made it through one or two of them, and he's just waiting on kind of a final approval. It would allow for parking from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. So nothing in the evenings for extracurriculars, no weekend parking for extracurriculars, et cetera. We'd obviously be responsible for snow removal and taking care of the parking lot. Probably at the end of that 3-year term, it would be 3 years worth of parking. If they felt like asphalt needed to be redone or paint stripes or whatever needed to be redone, I'm sure that they're going to want an agreement saying we'll take care of that. So hopefully that'll get taken care of and we can open that up to some parking for students, which would be very helpful. That's kind of where Timpview's at. We also just did a statement of interest and qualifications for small projects for architects. And what that does is just give us the ability to have on our vendor list 3, 4, 5 architect firms that we can just reach out to help Mark with projects. For example, if we needed to reach out to them to start talking about the bathroom redesign at Westridge without having to actually contract with them and go through our RFP process. So it's part of the state procurement process. We just kind of do an upfront qualification standards with those people, and then if they meet our requirements, they can be put basically on our list to call. So he's working through that and finishing that up with Tina. Most of those are architects that we've worked with in the past, so well-known architects. He wanted to do one more shout out once more to custodial operations, Jeff Hawkins and all his folks for all the work that they've been doing. Again, they just keep on working through our schools and keeping things disinfected and working around schedules as they can out at secondaries with the addition of extracurricular activities. Obviously, they're helping out when we have our vaccine clinics and our testing clinics. And so there's been a bit of extra work for that group, and he just wanted to make sure that they were recognized for that one more time. One other small note that he thought maybe I might share with you is we currently have 676 security cameras working in our district. It's not evenly spread over every school because obviously a large school is going to have more cameras than a small school, but not a small number. So a lot of our safety and security work that we were doing and try to continue to do through this COVID nightmare is paying off. And we have a lot of extra security cameras in our schools that are functioning and working and helping us out. So he wanted me to share that with you as well.
Let me just add that every now and then we'll apply for a COPS grant. COPS stands for something else I don't remember at the moment, but that helps to fund school security and relationships with local police and departments and those kinds of things. And that's one of the ways that we've been able to afford a number of these cameras, and it's really enhanced our overall security for the district.
Melanie, you had a question on the capital projects list about the overage on the mobile units. So they did run into some things that they wanted to do a little bit, I'll say more professionally on some of the sites. Rather than doing overhead electrical and overhead data, they chose to go underground to keep it safer, to keep it from getting hit by various things. So that kind of bumped up some costs. We also ended up putting some cabinets and shelving in some of those units when we ordered them. We ordered them pretty much blank, so that teachers would have a lot of room to do what they wanted to with their desks and their chairs and everything, especially during COVID. So we ended up dropping some money there as well. And he's going to look into to see if there was any other big ticket items. But what we'll do with that is what we normally do at the end of the year with his capital projects. We take a look at where he's at, what projects he hasn't started and might not be able to start in the fiscal year, and we just do some budget shifts. So I don't expect to be coming to the board to increase his budget for that. We'll probably just shift internally within his budgets to cover that.
Thank you.
So that's it for the capital projects report. Any questions, anything I can take back to Mark to have answered? Yes.
And are we going to have a report on the machine that's measuring the seismic testing of the other buildings at Timpview?
Yeah, so I will put that on for the 20th retreat. We're going to be spending a little bit of time at that retreat talking about long-term capital planning. Every year at the February, March retreat, we usually talk about budget priorities, what are Mark's capital plans for the next following years, or next following year, and then a longer term capital plan. So that's slated for the 26th. I will ask him to bring that with him to discuss that day, to give us an update. That's a good question.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question, something I'm wondering about. With the limited amount of parking we'll have, even if we are able to use the church parking lot, is there some kind of plan to allocate the spots to the students? How would that work?
Fidel, any talk about that?
We're gonna list Todd Hickey's phone number, his personal cell phone number, and that flyer for patrons. No, but in reality, you want that, Todd?
It sounds like a plan.
Plan.
Yeah, sounds like a great plan.
It's already out there.
No, so the church parking lot is definitely gonna help a lot. I know Mark also communicated with the city about the possibility of using a field that's north of the school, but I don't think that conversation went as well. So unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of space, and the parking lot that's on the east side of the school and the south side of the school, the field, they're using that for setup, so that's where they're placing a lot of their machines and so forth. So we're going to encourage our students to ride bikes. It'd be great if they carpool, but recommending carpooling during COVID is sort of problematic, right? So we're between a rock and a hard place, honestly, on this issue.
So like a permit system or something for the kids who can park?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously we're gonna privilege our upperclassmen, so our seniors and our juniors, and really discourage our sophomores and our freshmen from, obviously our freshmen don't drive, but especially our sophomores. Second semester, we always get an increase in parking demands because a lot of the students are getting their licenses during this time. So it's going to be tricky, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll ask one question, then I'll go to you.
Is Mark asking about the second building on Timpview Drive? I mean, so the one in the neighborhood, just sort of kitty corner from Edgemont is one, but, I mean, the other one is further away, but, I mean, are we gonna have to do shuttles to these, from these parking lots?
This one's within walking distance. He's actually got the path. I'll send you guys the map. I was meant to get it to Bonnie so we
It's
could
just
project it.
behind Edgemont Elementary.
Yeah, it's just behind Edgemont. There's actually a walking path already mapped out for those students to follow. I will send that to you all in an email.
Going along with the parking, are we looking ahead that those students that are at, or the teachers and faculty that are at Edgemont, there's a way to keep kids from parking in the Edgemont parking lot as well?
Yeah, Edgemont has been brought up. I think we need to have some internal discussions about that, pros and cons of maybe parking kids and or faculty at Edgemont. But it was something that has been brought up in discussions on occasion. So I think internally we probably need to sit down and Keith may have some opinions on whether or not that's a good idea.
Well, I'm
We
saying.
may have to do it.
Yeah,
It may not be an option.
okay.
So, I think Mark's thoughts, I think, are the parking that will remain at the school is enough for faculty, but not enough for students. So we would put the faculty at the school and then try to get the students out and about at these other places.
Okay. Board Member Mccabe?
I think my question is more for Dr. Montero. Have you contacted Provo Bike Walk? Provo Bike Walk, they encourage people to bike or walk to work or school.
You know,
They might be helpful.
I have not, but if you can send me whoever their contact person is, that'd be great. Anything that we can promote and sponsor from a walking, bicycle standpoint. In fact, our administrative team was thinking about putting together some funds where we'll buy students bikes and, have bikes available for those that want some. But that's a good recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions about construction? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go to the policy review, and do you want to start it? And then
I'll start it. Actually, I will start it by handing it off to Stephanie because the policies that are being proposed are in the business series, and she'll introduce those to you.
Okay, I'm being asked by the people that will be on the next item that they can't get into Zoom, so let me send them an email real quick. Bonnie, do you have Brian Baker's email? They can't seem to get into the Zoom. Okay. Okay, so policies. As you know, school fees the last couple of years have been a pretty big topic throughout the state, with the state legislature making some changes 2 years ago. Devin has been working tirelessly, once again, with school fees, with the help of the principals out at the secondaries to get them prepared. Under the new state rule that went into effect 1 or 2 years ago, we have to bring school fees to you as a board twice instead of just once, and they have to be approved and ready to go by April 1st. So if you recall, we did it a little early last year because of that rule, and we're getting it started again this year because of that rule. So this will be our first meeting to just kind of look at the draft school fees. With that, we have a couple of policy changes, and they're pretty minor. Policy 6160, which is your school fees and fee waivers, has a minor adjustment to, let me open it so I don't speak incorrectly. And Devin, if I get this wrong, chime in. Devin's the pro on this one, so I'll defer to her. It has a minor adjustment where the superintendent and the board used to set our fee waiver levels. That is now being set by the state. So that was just a clarification item within that policy. Other than that, really nothing has changed. So kind of a minor adjustment, but we thought we better at least bring it to the board since it has to do with fee waivers. The other policy change is in 6110, which is our donation policy. And the edits there, let me get this open. I thought all this stuff was open on my computer, and apparently it was not. The edits there, I believe, are on page 4 or 5. And it basically goes to group fundraising. And Devin, correct me if I'm wrong, it basically states that if we do a group fundraising for an activity and that activity brings in more than they expected, that we're allowed to carry those group funds, those fundraising funds over into the next year for that activity. So they have to stay with that activity, but we can continue to use them. Did I get that right? Okay. The pro says I'm right. So those are the two changes to policies, pretty minor, but we figured we better bring them to you. And there will be a time for you to approve those at the business meeting after 7 o'clock. Any questions on those?
Board Member Partridge?
Okay, so I understand this was just minor changes, and my questions are about other things in the policy, so I'd like to bring them up, but maybe if we need to talk about it at another time or something. But I'm curious on policy 6160, the school fees and waivers. Line 58 says all non-waivable fees are subject to fee waivers. And as someone who's not involved with this heavily, I'm confused what that means.
I'm going to let the pro answer that question. And actually, this is a great time to do it because part of the rule says that we will review policies and procedures with you.
Okay,
so
great.
this is the perfect time for us to check that box.
So non-waivable fees are yearbooks, school lunches, school apparel that is not required for an activity. So anything that is taxable to students is not waivable. So that's not subject to fee waiver. It just, there's not very many things on the list that is not considered a waivable fee.
So this says that they are subject to fee waivers, so is this a typo?
It could be, so I'll review that.
So
If
we
it
need
says,
to correct that
so
then.
non-waivable fees are not subject to fee waiver.
Okay, then I think we need to correct that,
Okay.
so that makes
That was line 58-ish.
58 of 6160, yes. And then I am curious, it's in 6160, the policy. It talks about how AP tests are not subject to fee waivers.
Correct.
I'm just wondering.
AP tests are not because they're for college credit. So same with distance learning, concurrent enrollment. Anything for higher education is not waivable. So AP tests have to be paid. They can't be waived. Now, a school can choose to pay them for students, but they are not, we don't have to waive them for students who are waivable. And
We do have some mechanisms to be able to pay for these for students who are
Correct.
financially in trouble. So that's really not an issue, but the technical aspect of what you're raising is a fair point, clarification.
So that's the policy from the state then?
correct.
or-
We need to specify which fees are not waivable, but anything that is not waivable, we can still waive. We can still waive if we need to. It's just we are not required to waive them.
So as a board, could we choose that we could waive? I just,
No. So this is an area that they've established. They've just recently hired a permanent person to tell districts how to do this. That's one that they don't want state money to be used in a way. That doesn't mean that they don't want people to take AP tests, but the College Board has a program and the fee has to be paid, by someone, and it became paid by the district, but basically the student will get credit for having paid the fee.
Okay.
Not like someone will say, oh, yours was free and yours was not. They're all paid by someone.
Yeah, the AP will bill us for every single test that was taken. So we are required to pay it. We cannot use state AP funds to pay for student fees. It would have to be local donations or something else like that.
okay, thank you.
Was that all your
That
questions?
was it.
Any further questions on these policies? Board Member
Oh,
McCabe?
Jennifer took my first question. So my second one is actually, I had a parent talk to me saying they were having difficulty getting refunds from Provo High School when their child, at the beginning of the school year, when they change classes so often, they're being charged for a class their kid is no longer in. And at Dixon, they didn't have a problem, but now at Provo High, I don't know if that's like a computer glitch or.
So the system
What's
that we
going
use
on?
makes it a little bit difficult sometimes, and the process for refunding is different on a high school level. And so I will
They were
discuss that.
complaining that they had to physically have a receipt to prove that they don't
I
need
will,
to pay
I'll
that
review that
anymore.
with the financial secretary at the high schools.
Okay.
So maybe you could get with her later, because it doesn't sound like it's part of the actual policy changing.
Right. The refunds are part of the policy, but it's not part of the policy change.
So,
Correct.
all right. Is there any more questions about the policy?
Thanks, Dawn.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll double check on that line 58, Jennifer, and make sure that we get that corrected, but otherwise we'll have that on the business items for approval.
Okay, moving
And
on.
we'll talk more about school fees themselves in a
Yes.
couple agenda items.
Moving on to E, consideration for adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not more than $80 million aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds, Series 2021, and related matters.
Whew, say that
A
again.
lot.
Was Brian and Randy able to get on, Bonnie? Okay, so online on Zoom, we have Brian Baker from Zion's Finance, who is our financial advisor for our bonding. You probably remember Jonathan Ward in the past has helped us. Brian is here locally, so he's kind of transitioning into being our go-to guy on this. So he's on, as well as our bond counsel, Randy Larson. If you were with us for our last bond, you probably remember Randy. So if you have any questions that are technical, I'm going to defer to the two of them. This is basically a resolution that you as a board will adopt that authorizes the school district to actually now sell the bonds that were on the ballot back in November. So the board made a decision to go out to bond. The bonds got placed on the ballot. The bonds passed on the ballot. And so now we need to start preparing to actually sell those bonds in order to finance the building of the partial build of Timpview High. So we're slated to sell those bonds in March. If I didn't already send you all a schedule, I will send you a schedule, especially Melanie, you, because I think you have to be at a couple of the meetings. There's some due diligence meetings that go up to that, a bond rating meeting. There's some things that happen along the way before those bonds are sold so that the market is comfortable buying those bonds from us. So tonight on the business meeting, you have a resolution to authorize the sale of up to $80 million in general obligation bonds based on your election. The resolution and the parameters will outline that it's not to exceed 80 million, that it's to be used for Timpview High School's rebuild. It will outline the estimated rate, which we've estimated at 5%. Brian, you can speak to this a little bit. We don't expect it to be nearly that high. Rates are actually quite good right now, but we have to have a buffer. Brian or Randy, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you described, this has been drafted in accordance with prior bond resolutions of the district with a designated officer where we create the parameters around such bonds. The passing of the election is what grants the school district the authority to do so. And so we have parameters on the bonds listed within the resolution that will be finalized with the help of Brian in getting final terms on those bonds with a term certificate. So the bond proceeds are limited to the bond election authorization. So we've kept the uses just as expansive as they were in the election. And of course, I stand ready for any questions. We do serve as bond counsel to the district, not to the bond purchasers. So feel free to ask us any questions, and there are no dumb questions.
Any questions?
All right, I just want to start out with just double check. So you're going to get us the schedule of when we would be selling these, or are we selling the full 80 million all at once?
We'll be selling the full 80 in one sell. What I have is a schedule of all those things, those steps to get to them. And Melanie, you as board president will need to be involved in that. So I'll get you that schedule if I didn't already. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've had it for about a week. So we've already taken care of a couple things. We got the state's guarantee on their bonding rate, which is AAA. We'll have a bonding meeting virtually. We won't be traveling to San Francisco this time. We'll be doing that virtually. Due diligence, I think, is our next thing on there. So I will get that out to you for sure, Melanie.
Okay.
I have questions.
Member
Go ahead.
McCabe.
So on page 2 or page 6, depending on which one, it's page 6 onward. In the middle, it says, whereas the Utah State Treasurer has delivered or is expected to deliver to the district a certificate of eligibility attached hereto as Exhibit D. There were no exhibits.
Yeah, so we did receive that from the state treasurer, I think yesterday, so we'll insert that. That was the guarantee that I was just speaking to. They have a AAA rating, and they, as a state entity, can pass that on to school districts. So we do have that, and we'll slip that into the exhibit when we finalize that paperwork.
Okay. On page 8 or 12, number 2.4, it says the bonds shall be issued as fully registered bonds without coupons in the denomination of $5,000. Why $5,000?
2.4.
That's a standard increment for the bonds, meaning that the market typically trades municipal bonds in $5,000 increments, meaning that you could buy as small as a $5,000 bond, but not smaller. So investors are limited to buying bonds, which will aggregate to the total 80 million, but they are limited in taking their positions to $5,000 increments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
On page 24 or 20, it's number 4.2. At the end of a very long run-on sentence, it says, certified to Salt Lake County, Utah in each year. Shouldn't it be Utah County?
Very good catch. Yes, that should be Utah County.
And I saw in a couple of places the maturity date, but it was not listed.
Yeah, but the maturity date isn't quite set yet. So once we sell the bonds, then the maturity date gets set.
Okay.
Yeah, the maturity dates can be set by the term certificate and the final bond sale. So that is freedom the designated officer will have, but they will be annually.
And then on page 31 and 35, which is 6.4, it says our office is in Sandy, Utah. And then also on page 32 or 36, 6.10, it also lists our address as Sandy.
Okay, we'll get that
fixed.
Well,
I appreciate the read, and you've identified corrections that need to be made prior to the closing. But yes, of course, that should be Provo and Utah County. And now you've caught me twice. If you have any educational experience, bond lawyers are not known for being succinct.
Hey, I
Sounds
had
like
to do
there
this
might
for
be
my
more, Randy.
PhD.
When you said run-on sentence, that's the world I live in. Is bond speak. So apologies up front for
isn't every
100
legal
years of
document just
precedent.
one run-on sentence?
And then it says it was publicized in the Daily Herald. Which day was that?
It will be publicized, Randy, remind me, publicized on February 13th? I think was the date
I'm
Laurie
sorry, I
gave
couldn't
me.
quite hear that. Say that again, Stephanie.
Our public notice, I believe Laurie, your assistant Laurie Tuttle, is going to do that on February 13th.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all my
So
questions.
in a couple days, it'll be in the paper.
Thank you.
Good catches, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay,
Any other questions about?
okay, so that is,
What range are we looking at? Are we gonna get under 2%?
under 2 on the district.
Are you
Yeah,
looking-
on a rate.
I'm gonna let Brian Baker speak to the interest rates in those terms. He's the expert on that one,
Yeah,
right?
the good news is that, I don't know, it feels like things are starting to pick up. With Utah not having closed down as much as other states, our economy has been pretty good for a decent time, especially compared to a lot of the other states who shut down more than we did. So we ran some numbers back in June before your election for your tax impact analysis, and the rate that we used, the true interest cost rate at that time, was around a 1.93%. We are definitely below that, and so I would think we would be 1 3/4, or lower, because rates have gotten better. And what's interesting is when the market becomes really choppy and volatile, Sometimes people park their money in safer assets, and certainly AAA rated municipal bonds with the state of Utah guarantee for Provo School District are very safe assets. And so we've seen some very aggressive bids in the last couple of months on bond issues that we've seen for local governments on the school district side, but also even for sewer and water and electric and that sort of thing. We've seen very aggressive bids. And so we would think that the numbers that we used for your tax impact that were put on the ballot, that those numbers will be high, and that the tax impact based on having a better interest rate will be lower than what was promised. You know, how much remains to be seen, but it's pretty clear right now that we're in a better environment than we were when those first numbers were run back in June.
Yay.
I have a question.
That's good.
Is there any advantage? I think we have a variable rate, don't we, that varies by. Any advantage to just doing a set interest rate, set 20-year?
Well, so this will the way they work, and it's kind of interesting. You'll get a fixed interest rates for the 20-year life of these bonds, and the way that works is instead of them just saying, here your rate is 175 or your rate is 150, they actually give you a rate for a bond that matures in 1 year, because some amount is going to pay off in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and so they actually give you 20 rates, because along that, they call it the yield curve, an investor is going to pay a higher interest rate for the 20-year bond than they would for the 1 year bond, and every bond in between. But so they'll give you 20 rates, but the way that we run the numbers boils it all down to which of the bidders, whoever's proposing, is giving you the overall aggregate lowest cost of borrowing for all of it.
Thanks.
Nate, when we did this a couple years ago, we actually did the sale. We watched the sale virtually from boardroom one, and it was all of like 3 minutes to sell. At the time, it was $108 million in bonds, but it was pretty fascinating to watch. So I'll talk to Brian whether or not we can set that up again so the board members can come in.
Yeah, we certainly could do that. We've been doing them these days on Zoom or on something like that, because it's really easy to just kind of throw one of our computer screens up on the board that'll show as the bids come in, and then everybody who's on can talk and hear and ask questions and get feedback and respond as we see what the results are. So that's certainly something that can be arranged.
It's amazing how fast like 108 million can be spent.
I think that would,
in our case,
Murray was
purchase.
beside himself with excitement.
yeah.
The sale date is the day that you'll want to ask Brian for the over-under at 2%. Ask him to put some money down on that.
Yes. So
I think I'd lose. I know every 3 months I have to answer the question, have you guaranteed a client a rate? And I know that I can lose my job for doing that. So.
Okay, well, I think that would be great if you could set that up for us.
Okay, we'll
That
work
would
on
be
that.
interesting.
We'll work on doing it virtually. So.
Okay.
Okay,
Heather.
any other questions on that? Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Brian and Randy. If you'd like, you can hang around for the rest of the meeting, or you can do what most people in their right mind would do and go enjoy your night.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us try in electronically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, next we have the Provo City Redevelopment Agency, and I'm going to let Stephanie Bryant introduce that as well.
Okay. I will introduce you. Most of you are familiar with David Walter. He's from the Provo City Redevelopment Agency. He comes to the board generally to either give us updates on existing RDAs and CDAs, or to make a couple proposals to the board on what the city might be looking at to do in redevelopment areas. He is also joining us online. He's kind of dark, but he's there. We can see him. I'm going to let him talk you through a couple of proposals that he's bringing us tonight. One is from Blue Sky, and Blue Sky Mccabe Christensen is with us. If you have questions about that directly for him, he can help us out. And then the other one is for a Qualtrics tax increment over in the Qualtrics area. Is anybody here for that? We have representation for that as well. Thank you for showing up. I'm sorry I don't know your names, but I'm sure David will introduce you, and I'm going to just turn the time over to David and let him take it away. David, did you want that PowerPoint up on the screen?
Sure. I'm not going to see what you've got up there, but
okay.
Maybe we could start with Alteryx.
Okay.
That was the smaller PowerPoint. So, as you know, Alteryx is a very successful company here in Provo. It started here in Provo. It's grown here in Provo. They tend to expand in Provo, and they're currently co-headquartered in Provo and in Seattle. So due to their success, they are looking to expand. And over the next 10 years, they expect to hire over 100,000 people with an average salary of about $80,000 annually. They also would like to double their existing space in the Riverwoods Business Park. And the first picture on that PowerPoint is the project area that the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City adopted. And they intend to double that office space. They currently have about 150. They plan to do 165,000 square feet addition to their existing property. And in order to accommodate all the people that they will be hiring, they will be building structured parking. And that's the purpose for the interlocal agreement for you tonight. And so as a result of that, they're going to make some leftover parking available to other businesses in the Riverwoods Business Park and also to help them succeed. They approached the state of Utah and were successful in getting a EdTIF from the state, and so they got some funding from there. And the state is asking us to look at providing them some additional revenue in support of that, and this is the purpose of our request for the interlocal agreement in the redevelopment project area.
Darren, will you go to the next slide on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I was just advancing your slide.
Oh, okay. So, you know, the nice thing about this is it's a very successful, very good success story here for Utah in general and Provo in particular. It's a business that started here in Provo in a basement / garage essentially, and has grown to be a leading contender in the customer service, customer experience field. And they were acquired by SAP out of Germany. And then they have also now spun off and had an IPO that's been very successful as well. So it continues to highlight, I think, some of the success that the Utah economy has had, that we've been able to kind of grow and be able to attract and hopefully retain companies like Qualtrics in our area. So this will continue to provide jobs for the local economy over the next 10 years.
And David, this is a 70% increment for 12 years, correct?
Yes, that's the request.
Does anybody?
And so when the city council initially considered this, we had a much broader project area, but in recognition of, you know, not being too much of a drain on the school district and on the city, that we scaled it back to a much smaller venue so that we could be able to not have as big an impact on our respective budgets and as in the future as the tax grows. So.
We do have some gentlemen from Qualtrics here if you have any individual or specific questions maybe.
Go ahead, Board Member Mccabe.
Yeah, my question is for Qualtrics. Now that people are working from home more, is this a company that's going to continue working from home, or they really need this amount of space for another building? Like, what's their plan? Are they expanding that much that eventually they'll be working in a building?
We miss being in the office, I'll put it that way.
And I apologize, I did not get your gentleman's name before we started. That's my bad.
My name is Michael Shields. I lead facilities and real estate globally for Qualtrics. We miss being in the office. We have a great culture there, and our plan is to obviously kind of assess the situation real time and watch what other people are doing, but we would love to get back. And I've chatted with our CEO, our president, our CFO, and we're seeing if we can make that happen sooner than later. We do have the facility open part-time right now to those who need it, and I was in there today. It's not the same, but we do, I mean, we were out of room prior to the pandemic. We were squeezing people in. Now we can't really squeeze people in safely. So we have plans drawn up, and, you know, the intent is to continue to grow here and expand in here in Provo.
David, isn't the benefit conditional on improvements to the property? That's if they don't happen. So if they don't happen, there's not.
Yeah, if Qualtrics never ever improves the value of the property, then yeah, there wouldn't be any increase in the assessed value for us to ask for a portion of.
Yep. So if they decide, if they change course, you know, we want you here. We're proud that, you know, that we don't have that many Provo companies. Provo is, you know, that's a great thing. And if there's not improvement, there's not a benefit. So we're certainly interested in that. So.
Right. Just to clarify for the board, particularly the two new board members, we're not asking for approval tonight. He's just bringing you proposals for us to get a little bit of direction from you. If you feel comfortable with the proposals, and David kind of starts taking the next steps. For the board, the next step would be actually approve a resolution to do an interlocal agreement. So there's no approvals tonight. This is just proposed, bringing it to your attention that this is something that they're looking at doing.
Go ahead. So then, David, has Qualtrics been through the approval process yet with the Planning Commission and the neighborhood chairs and everything?
They have started that process. They have not completed it as yet.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess another, you know, we're stating, since we have a couple of we have a policy that was included that our school district only forgoes a certain percentage of possible, and so we have a cap that David works around, and so David works at the best projects to bring to us. Mayor John Curtis, you know, when we were trying to say what's a good rule of thumb of how to decide, he said that, you know, you want to find out if it's a positive to the district, which it is. It's 70% participation, so we're going to get 30%. Even in the 12 years of the agreement, we're going to get 30% more tax rate than we would if they made no improvements. And then his next rule of thumb was if it's a positive for the district, you just want to go first come, first serve. These projects will be ready. And so I think that simplifies our process compared to some of the other school districts that don't have a cap. They're always wondering, do we add this on? Do we add this on? Do we give this? Do we give this? We have a cap, and we're looking at, you know, a limit, and we go, oh, well, who's here? Great, who has a project ready to go? And that's helped us to be, you know, answerable to our public. Our public has had a little bit of a, they like being a residential community, actually. And so, you know, when people ask about retail or businesses in Provo, that's one of the reasons. It's the policies are based for residential, but we've had growth, so our cap space grows, and here we are with a good project with a premier employer, and so that will go into our consideration, certainly. Certainly, this is the type of company that normally we see at Point of the Mountain, and it's good to see you in Provo.
I appreciate those words. I personally love Provo, born here, live here, send my kids to Canyon Crest, right? With that being said, part of my job is to continue to justify why we invest here in Provo, because if you're not from here, if you don't know what an awesome place it is, they think we should go somewhere else, right? They shouldn't think we've got underutilized space in other areas, or, go to where some of the talent wants to be, who are not from, the state of Utah. So appreciate your support. We'd want to continue to be a force for good as a company, and we want to continue to expand and grow here in Provo. And so, this only helps us justify and, to, our now public shareholders as well as our German ownership. So.
Great. I think if you want to take something back to your company, this is in a way you could say that, we're interested in you. It's nice when they can show interest in us, and in particular our students and our youth. And being able to outline how that works out is always a bonus too.
Yeah, very happy to brainstorm any ideas you may have. We've always tried to be a good partner. I know, one of our local providers here is a food services company, and I remember I called her up when the pandemic started, and she said, "Okay, are you canceling, your services?" I said, "No, how can we help?" And we've been continuing to pay them a lot of money to donate meals, including to the school district, et cetera, and very open to other ideas how we can help. So we've always been, from ideas of like sponsoring the Jazz Patch, not in our name but in our charity. Those are all things that we want to do to give back and to be a force for good, which is written, by the way, in our S1 as we filed public, as we, Ryan and the other in the ownership truly want to, utilize the success we've had to be a force for good in our community. So.
Any further questions for Qualtrics?
Can I ask one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to do my normal gripe when these come up. I've been thinking about this for a little while, and I was thinking about my son when he went to Timpview, and poor Todd was his principal. When my son was a freshman in 9th grade, I taught him the prisoner's dilemma. I got him and all his friends together, taught him about the prisoner's dilemma, and Todd was never able to pin anything on them because they were always able to resist telling on each other. And I don't blame Qualtrics, I don't blame anyone, but as politicians and as government entities and as states and as a nation, we've kind of done this to ourselves where it's just a little bit of a race to the bottom and we're all bidding against each other. And I know that there's nothing we could do as this body because we are the victims of it. We're playing the game that we have to do. And of course, I'm going to vote for this because Qualtrics has been a great Provo company. I just wish someone somewhere would stop. It's kind of like a bill of attainder in reverse, where we pass these laws and we legislate to help one particular company, and we do it. It doesn't really help any other companies. It just hurts ourselves. So I just wanted to complain in public. So sorry to bug you guys. I'm out.
You might want to go talk to a couple legislators because they're trying to change RDA rules so they're their own taxing entity. Might make some phone calls there, Nate.
Well, the problem is every state has to do it. It's if one state's doing it, every state has to do it.
Yeah, and once again, I'm just trying to justify keeping it here in Provo. I get the sentiment there, and I'm an advocate for changing the rules at the top, but I play by the rules, right? So.
I would be doing it myself. You have to do it if you're a company.
It's awkward here. My wife got mad at me because my kids go to school here, right? So, but anyway, look, we love Provo. Thank you.
Go ahead, Superintendent.
David, when would you plan to be bringing this back to the board for approval?
Well, as soon as we could. The city council's taken a look at it, and I provided Ms. Bryant with copies of the proposed interlocal and the staff and the spreadsheets for her to review and to take a look at. So yeah, I mean, we're aware of the cap and we're aware of it, and we don't bring every deal forward, and there are certain things that we've done that we're trying to have a better impact for the city as a whole. So looking at blight removal, looking at increasing the capacity of our existing businesses to retain and to help them expand. So, the COVID kind of threw everybody in a loop, and I know that the school district's been at the forefront of that. I think that, helping to keep Qualtrics here in Provo would be beneficial for everybody. I don't want to trot out the old Adam Smith line, but it's gonna increase the opportunities, and there are going to be some great spin-off effects as people come in to help support those businesses. And we just think it's an investment into the community as a whole.
So could we look forward to formal action being brought before the board for a request within the next 2-3 months, or would you think it would be longer than that?
It would be sooner than that. We would want to do that probably within the next 30 days.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for Qualtrics?
Okay. David, would you like to introduce Blue Sky then?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you. And Stan, I didn't realize that was you until you got closer.
It's the mask. He could be robbing us.
Darren, will you bring up that other presentation, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear all of that.
Okay. We're bringing up the Blue Sky PowerPoint, so if you want to speak to Blue Sky.
Sure. So this is a mixed-use project in the downtown area. It's supposed to be on the corner of Center Street and 100 East. Mr. Christensen's been working for a number of years to make this possible. So I don't know if you're familiar with the exact corner, but it's right across from the county building. It's kind of the end of the traditional Center Street business row, and it's had a very vacant building on it, which was a former gas station / automotive use for the last several years. It's been really kind of an eyesore for that part of the community. It's been an opportunity for people to hang out and to, cause trouble when they can. Mr. Christensen's been assembling the property with his partners, and so right now, what you're looking at is a proposed layout. I hope that's what you're looking at. So it's a proposed building, multi-story, mixed-use project. It's going to have, I believe, it's about 130 residential units, and it's going to have the commercial units on the bottom. So the bottom space is all going to be commercial / office. So Mr. Christensen's been talking to several restaurants about increasing that opportunity. He is going to make sure that the parking for the residents will be self-contained. He's talking to the city about using some of the parking spaces within the Wells Fargo parking garage to help meet the needs of the commercial businesses that would be on that ground floor. And so if you kind of scroll down, you can kind of get, you can see where Blue Sky is. This would be like the fourth page in. You can see that it's right there. There's a couple of older office buildings that are no longer being used. It's right up against the Harmon House to the east, the county building to the south, and some residential to the north. And then across the street, you can see where it's been happening with the Wells Fargo building in the center, and 63 East is along Center Street. So it's kind of a continuation of some of the efforts that we've made as partners in the downtown area. The nice thing about this is that this would be the first project within the new redevelopment, would be the first project in the Center Street project area. So that was adopted in 2013, and it's just the length of Center Street from 200 East down to 600 West, one block on either side of Center Street. And so this is what we're looking at here. You can see a couple of the floor plans. There is some parking. You go down to the seventh page, you can see that they have parking there. And then you can start to see what the lobby and the commercial space is going to be looking like. And then he has, I think, 6 floors of residential space with a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. You can see that he's kind of wrapped the parking, he's wrapped these units around the parking. He's going to also be improving the median that's in front of along Center Street in front of his building. So he's going to bring additional street level parking to do that. He's asking for some help with the TIF in order to help, provide some of those improvements along Center Street. If you kind of go down to about the 16th page, you can see some of the stalls that he's proposing to make along 100 East and Center Street. So he's got quite a few stalls that he's going to add to improve and to help the parking in the downtown. So it's 131 units residential. He's going to be providing bike storage. Hopefully that will, since they're in the downtown area and they have access and are close to the transit area, there'll be some opportunities for people to, drive their car, park it, and then be able to walk to amenities in the downtown. And help increase the opportunities for the restaurants to succeed. Either right now through COVID, most of us are ordering takeout and taking it back home, but we'll be bringing in some additional residents into the downtown to help increase the viability and the activity in the downtown. So.
And this is also a 12-year, 70% participation. And also so that the board understands, we usually put a cap on those. So if tax rates go way up and the developments could end up getting more money,
I didn't mention that earlier, but there will be a monetary cap and a time cap, and whichever one gets hit first, let's just say that they're successful and it only takes them, 8 years to reach the monetary cap. The project would end after the 8 years and we would no longer be participating. This is nice because it does remove a blighting influence right there on that corner, and it also helps increase our opportunities to provide residential units in the downtown.
So in the interest of time, we do have Mccabe, Christensen, and a couple others here. Do you have any questions for Blue Sky before we conclude this part?
Board Member Partridge.
Yeah, I was just curious with the size of the apartments or condos, about how many families you anticipate. Are we going to be getting many school-aged children in this complex?
So, first of all, thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate it, and thank you for considering this. We've worked, like David said, I think this is about year 5 that we've been working on this project, and so we're happy for the opportunity to be here. Yes, so there's 131 units. In terms of families, it really is sort of, it's hard to determine at this point, but we have a high concentration of 1 bedrooms, a lesser concentration of 2 bedrooms. We anticipate that it will probably be a lot of single working professionals. Probably, it's really not catered to larger families in what you would see like a garden style walk-up apartment complex.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
David, how far are they into the approval process?
They have been through the approval process and gone before the Planning Commission and met with the neighborhood chairs for the downtown area. And this is their last step in the process. But they have received approvals from Provo City.
So would you be bringing this to us in 30 days too, roughly?
I'm sorry?
Would you be bringing this to us in 30 days or so, like the Qualtrics?
Meeting?
Yes.
How quickly would we be acting? Yeah.
I think if we could come before the next business meeting with the resolution, that would be awesome.
And I do have the draft interlocal agreements on these. I've sent them
Yes.
over to our attorney to review. So we kind of took a step ahead in the process just so that we don't run out of time.
And
Go ahead.
how can students apply for the internship you mentioned in the application?
That's something that we probably need a little bit of input from you on how you guys recommend doing that, but we're certainly open to it. There's still a lot of work on the front end that needs to be done. I think it'd be a great opportunity for students to learn the construction management process, the pre-development process, and anything along the way. And so we're open to any ideas in terms of how you guys want to go through that application process, but we certainly would love the opportunity to be able to provide that.
I spoke with Quinn and Celeste, and they love your project, so.
Oh, good, good. Thank you.
I'm done.
What's your ratio of 1 to 2 bedrooms? Are you 80-20, or are you?
I want to say that we have about 30% 2 bedrooms.
30, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any further questions about Blue Sky? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming.
Questions about the RDA in general? So my concern is that if we do both of these, we hit our 5%.
Yeah, we're gonna be really close to the 5%. We do have a couple that are dropping off, which I factored into that.
Right.
I think the thing that we need to watch with that is we're just barely over the 5%, but I think we need to watch with that is just the fair market value of our tax base overall. I think I have it in there at a 5% increase, and we're seeing larger increases than that now. So my numbers are probably pretty conservative, to be honest. You know me, I'm the conservative one. If I was to go back and rework those numbers with maybe, I don't know, fair market values are probably increasing at 8% right now, I think we'd be okay. But we're going to be right on the line if we accept these 2 projects.
Because that would just mean
We'd be on hold until your tax base increases in the city, which happens every year, typically, knock on wood. But it would definitely hold, and David's aware of that. I send David those numbers all the time and remind him that if we do these couple of projects, we're kind of maxed out for a little while.
Okay. I have one more question. So this might be for David. The city, us, the county, anyone else that needs to approve these 2 projects?
Central Utah Water. The water district.
Yes. The city. David, the question is who else got skin in the game?
So, the city council's approved it. We're asking for the county to consider it as well. And then last would be the Central Water District.
And that's all?
Along with the city, those are the 4 entities that would be sharing the tax increment.
Have you done your presentation to the county yet?
I have not. I've been working with Mr. Shawcroft to get on their agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know that you guys have, I know that you've got a lot to consider as you guys go through this. One of the things that I just wanted to add is that, like David mentioned, this is on it's right on Center Street. It's really in the heart of downtown. It's tough. Downtown Provo is a little bit hard. Most of the properties are little postage stamp properties, and they're really, really difficult to economically develop. Ours is that way also. It's a fairly, we're on about an acre of property, but we're trying to, as a part of revitalizing downtown, the property, like David mentioned, is a total blight. It's an old gas station. You've got 2 broken down office buildings that are there. And it really does bookend the entire Center Street experience. I know that may not be something that the school board necessarily contemplates as they make their evaluation, but it's a fairly expensive project to develop, and we feel like what we're adding is a lot of things in terms of making it a safer place. You're right there in that center corridor where you've got the temple that's just kitty corner to us. You have kind of restaurant row that's in and around there. We're going to be bringing restaurants into downtown, and so we're trying to really do a great job of protecting the downtown core. And hopefully, maybe as you think about it, that's something that you consider as you go through that evaluation. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Any further questions on RDA? All right, moving on. And thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Again, if you want to stick around, you're welcome to.
All right, turning the time again to Stephanie for school fees.
I'm going to ask Devin just to come up and kind of take this one over. We already kind of did an introduction when we did the policy review. Under state rule, we have to look at school fees twice in a public setting. We have to allow for public input twice. So this will be the first meeting, and then we will do it again in March at the March 9th meeting, at which time you'll actually approve them. There's no approval tonight. This is your chance to ask questions, probably as much of the principals that are in the room as of Devin. I'm going to let Devin introduce the work she's done and the fees and a general idea behind them, and then you guys can ask the principals any questions you have about changes.
And Boyd had to leave. He had to supervise the basketball game.
I decided to wait just 5 minutes.
All right.
But I do need to
For the new board members, this school fee rule went into place last year, the bulk of it. We are required to provide a maximum amount of what each fee will be for each activity, each class, and a required amount. Some classes are the required and the maximum are the same because there isn't anything extra or optional involved in it. So we started this work with the principals at the end of November. They worked with their athletic directors and their advisors for all of their classes to look at the current school fees, see what needed to change. It's a challenge, though. We are approving school fees for things that might not be happening for over a year. And so you'll notice some of the changes were significant. A lot of the required fees were decreased because they're trying to utilize more things for multiple years. But some of the maximum fees went up because of possible travel for some of the teams and some of the groups. And some of them changed. There was only a few new fees. There was a new, I think it's Winter Winds at Provo High. That is a new program that they're starting this year. And then a geology class. Is that right? The CAPS program is a new class, but they are not charging fees. CTE will be working on that this year to not charge the kids fees because we have no idea what the cost will be. And if CTE can absorb that, that is ideal for those programs. So are there any questions? Our maximum, again, this year, we did not change it. It's $5,000 for a student for all of their activities for a year. We did cap that at 4 activities for a single year, so 4 extracurricular activities, so a student can do football and band, and not that that might be possible, but they can do 4 extracurricular activities, and the maximum that they will pay is $5,000.
And just as a reminder, last year when Devin did this work and we went through establishing that maximum, we were pretty well in line with most school districts in Utah. I think initially everybody's setting it just a little bit high until the dust settles and we figure out all the details of the spend plans and whatnot, but we're pretty in line with most school districts.
A lot of the larger school districts are around 5,000. Some of the smaller school districts are a little bit less. So we're right around just a little bit above the state average when you talk about every single district and charter school.
Can you remind me that if a student applies for student aid or financial aid, we would pay those fees for them?
The school would be responsible for paying the
We're
activity
capping it
fee.
at $5,000 per student.
So at $5,000 on the maximum, anything above that, the school would be required to pay.
Okay. I have a question.
Yes.
So how are we proactively letting the students who are in financial need, letting them know that they can get these fees waived?
So there are things that go out with the registration materials. We have on our website all the information about fee waivers with the applications, both in English and Spanish, so that they're easily accessible rather than having to go to 3 or 4 different places on the state website. We also have signs that the schools hang up at registration. The fee waiver deadline is October 15th, but that is one thing that we added into the procedure in the school fees procedure was that the superintendent can open that window for an unforeseen circumstance, like a pandemic. If there are things like that happen, hopefully it never happens again. But if it does happen again, then the superintendent can reopen that window. They're given copies of their statements at the beginning of the year with all the information about how to have their fees waived if they qualify. So there is a lot of proactive information given to parents in many different forms.
And that's something that the state audits as well.
Correct.
How we notify
Yep.
people. They audit us to make sure that we notify people correctly.
Yep, they make sure that all the forms on our website that they've given us copies of the posters to hang. at the schools, and then instructions on what needs to happen.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions specifically for the principals on any of those fees that they're asking to be edited, or why they're charging fees, anything like that? We'll have another opportunity in March, so
Dr.
no
Montero,
pressure.
is the 5,000 enough? The example they used in education appropriations when the school fees office or the state office testified was 10 for the Wasatch Front. Because so many people, they have a lot of folks apparently in other districts that go on 3 or 4 trips.
Yeah, so first of all, we got to give kudos to Devin because I think she's been so awesome, helping us navigate this process, and she spent a lot of time with us. Oh, you can't hear me? Oh.
I've got to hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Got to hear you.
Okay.
Repeat the kudos part. We need to hear that again.
Repeat the kudos.
I said that Devin deserves a huge pat in the back and kudos for helping us sort of navigate this process. And it feels like it's something that changes every year. And I know Boyd and I sort of, we try to stay on top of it, but she does a phenomenal job. In terms of the maximum, part of the challenge in particular with extracurricular activities is that what we charge our students is only a portion of what it costs for us to actually operate those activities. You take, for example, a program that has 50 students, and if 40% of your students qualify for free and reduced lunch, or qualify for the fee waiver, then that's revenue that you subtract from that total. And then on top of that, you have the students that don't pay. And then the true cost of the activity, which includes travel. I mean, this year our travel budgets nearly doubled because we were sending more buses due to the pandemic. That's a constantly increasing subsidy that we have to cover in essence. So, it's a tricky question. I mean, I think we manage and we try to provide an experience for our students that's affordable, that's accessible. I'm glad that we're not charging our students what the clubs in private sort of what they're having to pay to participate in sports. Because then we would block out access to our students. But, Boyd, I don't know if you would add anything to that question.
You hit it.
Yeah.
The $5,000 being a cap for a kid I think is reasonable for a family.
Is that per family or per student?
Per student. Well, yeah, per student. $5,000 per student is a lot to ask of a family. And we have families in our building with 2 or 3 kids, involved in activities. So I think it's a reasonable middle ground. No, it's not enough to cover the cost for a kid who's participating in 3 or 4 activities, but it's a good middle ground. It's a safe place to be.
So one last question, but maybe before you go, Boyd, with the documents that go out, are people becoming familiar that when they see that 5,000, that's the maximum? They understand they're not paying that, or
Yes,
is there sticker shock? They're getting used to that language, so they're not, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
And part of the effort that we need to do better of is getting in front of our parents and explaining to them sort of the true cost of participation. And I know we're making an effort, we're collaborating with Provo on some of those same things, so that people understand, hey, what's the true cost of participation? And, what are we going to fundraise? What are we going to do, on our end to help you sort of cover these costs? So we're trying to meet with, for example, tomorrow night, we have a parent meeting with all of our football parents, and it's, we're not anywhere near football season. Super Bowl just ended, and yet they're talking to them already about sort of, what's coming up.
Maybe one more quick question, though, that might be on the top of your head. What's your percentage of test to play? How many extracurricular students are you testing in your school?
How many what? Sorry.
How many students are you testing for test to play?
Oh, we've tested approximately 800 students in the past couple.
So about a third of your student body, and how much?
Yeah, we're less than that. I would say between 500 and 600.
But tested more than that maybe over the last 4 weeks.
Well, but if it's total students, we've got kids who are participating in multiple activities, so they might register on multiple roles as individuals.
What I'm wondering is, do we have the same level of involvement extracurriculars in both schools? Because if we don't, we need to say, because extracurriculars leads to success.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, and I appreciate the question and the concern. I think in general, our activity rate is lower. We would have to pull numbers. We submit numbers to UHSAA every year about participation by gender, by specific sport or activity. I don't think I've ever looked at those numbers in comparison with TIMPView, but that would be an interesting thing to consider. Yeah, I think we're between 400 and 500 kids is what we're testing right now.
Good question for either one of you. Do you find that by setting these fees that it keeps kids from not wanting to participate?
You want to take that or me?
Yeah, well, you know, that's part of our balancing act. It's a great question, but as we sort of consider our fees, the first consideration is, are we pricing students out from participating? And because we never want to be in that situation. And like I said, the reality is that we are subsidizing a huge cost of participation. If we were charging our true cost to play, for example, soccer, it would be a little bit more than what we're actually charging. But for us, that's always at the forefront. Is this a price that's affordable, that our families, that's not going to be a huge burden on our families, and yet that it's going to provide us enough resources to continue to support the programs? I mean, I'm sure you're in the same boat.
Yeah, I would agree. At Provo, yes. A short answer, yes. There are kids who are not participating because they can't pay the fees. I agree with Fidel. We're offering great value to our students with the subsidized monies that we're providing. But yeah, we do have kids that are not participating because they can't afford it in both performing arts and athletics.
Part of the challenge too is that so many of these students start participating in soccer and basketball and all of these activities when they're younger, and they don't have at those levels, they have to pay full amounts to participate in some of these clubs. And by the time they get to high school, they've already, they haven't been participating for so long that it creates a real disparity for them. So I think supporting our rec program, supporting, what the city's doing to provide access is a big deal. And we partner with the city and giving them gym space and doing some of those things. Stephanie has been great in, working out some of those details, because those are the types of programs that help students be involved. So by the time they get to the high school, they at least have been exposed and are doing stuff.
If I might suggest, in a year with the pandemic and limited field trip and travel costs, which are also factored into these fees, probably $5,000 or whatever it was we established is for next year probably pretty accurate. We're right now expecting to be really limited in student travel again next year, given what we're hearing. So this should work, and then we'll have to maybe revisit it again a year from now. That's just a proposal for you to consider.
Yeah.
We also have in the back of the room from Centennial, Brooke. I don't know if you have any middle school questions. I know most of the fees go towards the high school, but just so you know, we do have representation from the middle schools.
And also keep in mind that $5,000 is not just fees that parents are paying. It's heavily fundraising, but we are required to report a maximum of what it will require a student to participate. So whether a program plans on fundraising 70 or 80% of the amount of their participation fee, we still have to report that amount on the fee schedule.
All right, are there further questions about the fees?
Okay. So we will bring you a final draft of those fee schedules on March 9th. If you have any questions in between, probably best to shoot them to myself, Devin, or the principals, or all of us together. And then we can get those clarified before final approval on March 9th. Again, there is public input both tonight and March, assuming any public's around to do input to comment on school fees. That's based on state rule.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you, all your principals. Thanks, Brooke.
Melanie, can I ask a quick question about it?
Yes, go ahead.
Are these on the school websites or anything so parents know where to see these?
Yes,
so they
the
can
summaries are given to you. I'm in the process of updating the spend plans on the website where all the school fees are. And then I will finish translating them all into Spanish, because we have an English and a Spanish spend plan on the website.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. And yes, kudos to Devin. She does a lot of work on school fees. It's the thorn in her
Go to the
side.
website, you go, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work.
And she gets to work with some wonderful people at the USBE.
All right. Stephanie, budget requests and adjustments.
Okay. As you know, any budget adjustments that exceed 50,000 from the approved budget to the end of the school year need to be brought forward to the board. We have three of them tonight. We have an adult ed funding, which has a net revenue and expenditure of 0. We are adding a DLI school state level funding. Again, revenues and expenditures are going to equal 0, which is typical for most of our funding. And we have a final budget edit that will align youth in custody budget with the new state allocation. And that adds revenue of about 35,000. You'll see a few more of these start trickling in as we come around to the end of the budget cycle, aligning our numbers with final numbers from the state. The state generally gives us updated estimates in February. We don't have them yet. And as we get those updated estimates from the original estimates they sent us, we'll start adjusting and aligning budgets for this fiscal year to bring it into alignment with the state for the end of the year. So you may see a few of these alignment type adjustments coming through in the next couple months before we end out our fiscal year. There is a recommendation to approve in the business meeting after 7 o'clock.
All right. Any questions about any of these?
I have.
Go ahead.
Is this the adult ed fund from the federal? Is this an annual thing or is this a COVID grant or?
This is annual funding. So we get funding every year for adult ed. I don't know who the best council member is to speak to that. Maybe Doug? If you want to just very briefly speak to the adult ed program.
The DLI?
Adult ed.
Oh, adult ed.
And I guess you could cover DLI where you're standing there.
That's all right. No, I'll save that for another day. The adult ed program is kind of one that gets funding based on completions, and they have a point system and so forth. They've been really tight, frankly, because as the economy does really well, a lot of people see that going out into industry versus completing a high school diploma is an appeal to them. So lately they've been really tight as far as their budgeting there and just kind of operating on just basic numbers based on enrollment and completions of courses. So it's been pretty tight now going on about 3 years for the state.
And they're state funds.
They're state funds. It's a state line item funding.
Yep.
Okay. Any other further questions? All right, seeing none, we will go on to the 2022-2023 school year calendar survey results. This could be controversial.
I don't know why. The calendar is always something that is of controversy. So we went through our annual process to get to this point where we survey the community about their priorities and ask them which days they would like us to set our calendar around. For example, everybody likes 2 weeks of Christmas break. Everybody likes a full spring week of spring break. A lot of people like at least 3 days of fall break. So those are things that we send out initially in a survey and ask people to re-rank them for us. They came back very similar again this year. Those things that I mentioned are top of the list. Some of the other things that are on that list are end before Memorial Day, and that one's always pretty high on the list. The one about starting before or after the 20th of August actually usually always falls lower in the priority, which, you know, is funny because I always hear about that one a lot more, but people don't vote as high for it because they like those other things more. So we go through that process. Then we create calendar options based on that. We create an A and a B. We send those out to the community to vote on, and teachers and everyone in Provo gets an opportunity to see those and vote on those. We received our results back in January, and the results were that calendar B received a higher percentage of votes. So the difference between the two calendars is that calendar A started a little bit later, I believe, I'm going to pull them up just so I make sure I give you the right information.
2 days later.
2 days.
2 days.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. 2 days later, ended again before Memorial Day on the 26th of May, which is the Friday before Memorial Day. Calendar A had a shorter fall break, 1 day shorter than calendar B. And calendar B starts on the 16th of August and ends on the 25th, the Thursday rather than the Friday. It does have the 3 days of fall break. The other breaks are very similar. In other words, a full spring break, 2 weeks of Christmas break. So again, the vote came out with calendar B being the preferred option. One of the things that is a little different on A and B too that I haven't mentioned is that the semester ends on calendar B before Christmas, winter break. And it does make the terms, a little skewed in the number of days. So you have 83 days in the first term or first semester and 97 in the second semester. So it does offset those a little bit. But again, the community voted that they preferred having the term end prior to the winter break. And so, any questions?
Just assuming that we start going back to normal post-COVID or whatever next year, we would be putting in professional development days in there as well.
Yes, and so, and I'm trying to remember, did we already mark those in there? I don't.
No.
Yeah, we did leave those out, yes, because we removed them from this year's calendar, and I believe even the coming calendar. So just because we weren't sure where we would be. But yes, we could work with the school board on getting those back in there.
Okay.
Yes.
Those are waived days, by the way, so we do not have to extend the calendar days at all.
Yeah, so we would be leaving them on the counted days for the 180. We'd be attending 176 days or 177 days based on the number of professional development days we put back in the calendar, and we would choose when we place those days.
All right, I've got a question for you and then probably one for Todd as well. So do we have to pick one of these two, or can we have something in the middle where we start the day in between and still have the 3-day fall break and end before Memorial Day?
It's your decision. You may do what you choose as a board. Whatever the board says in majority can happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the only thing I would see with that, I don't see it's a bad idea. I just say the only thing is that he's already saying that the first 2 terms are already short, that would shorten it by 1 day in the beginning and lengthen it 1 day in the end.
Well, and I guess that's my other question. I guess we can determine where the terms in, but my question to Todd was, with calendar B, we've got an 83-day first semester. How does that affect our secondary schools and our students' ability to their grades and things like that?
Ideally, you would have an equal split between the 4 quarters. But it's interesting that there has been a growing request coming from the high school specifically to have the first semester end before the Christmas break. Right now, our quarters are imbalanced. None of them, it's rare that they are ever perfectly matched. So it's something we could adjust to.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I think that one of the concerns that has frequently been voiced about imbalanced semesters is, for example, when an AP test is given in the first few days of May, does that mean that AP instruction is over at that point? And that's one of the concerns that I hear about regularly almost every year from parents saying, my children are not doing anything for the remaining 2 or 3 weeks of the year. And I'm not trying to be critical of any individual teachers, but I know that there's a culture that we want to be careful about. And so it would probably be just a good reminder, both from the board and from me and administration, to remind people that the school year is supposed to end on the designated day, not 2 or 3 weeks in advance of it. Instruction is supposed to go straight through until the last day. That's the form I have to sign and send into the state.
I have a question. Go ahead. So these 1,488 people that filled out the survey, is it the same people that fill it out every single year, or do you actively go out and ask people to fill it out that haven't filled it out before?
That's a great question. So we have communicated it in several different ways. I haven't tracked specifically who responds to the survey on an annual basis as far as knowing whether or not it's a similar number. There have usually in the past been a greater number of people who have responded to the survey in general, but you know, we go through our social media sites, our websites, we push it out through our calling system, our email system, to all the people, our patrons, parents in our system. So, you know, it's a great question. I don't know if it is the same number or the same group of people who are responding year over year.
Is there any way to track, like, parents from which school fill it out in the future?
So Caleb and I, we did use Qualtrics. I'm sure we could go ahead and get into the data greater than we have to see if we can locate, you know, who's responding and where, and try to place that among which schools, which locations in the city, those types of things.
Do you ask that in the survey? What school do your students attend?
No, I mean, I remember as a parent, you pick A or B.
Yeah, we don't. We haven't traditionally. We have a second survey that we send out about feedback about the school district, which asks those types of questions. So it wouldn't be difficult to put that in on the front end of the question to be able to say, you know, which school do your students attend, or which boundary do you live in, something along those lines.
Have to probably be multiple. They would check, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a veteran of someone who's gone to meet with people who have upset about the calendar, when I ask, how would you like to be, you know, I didn't know about it, or what, you know, tell me about, they all say, please make sure it's in the email. And I go, oh yeah, we'll do that, knowing that that's the primary way that we send multiple emails about.
Yeah.
But that's the way that even, you know, that's the way they request, even when they're upset, they say, this is the way I want to be notified about the email.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
And some of the things we've tried to do to mitigate some of those issues, you know, beyond just sending the email and, you know, trying to do those types of things, we make sure that it is mobile friendly, you know, those kinds of things prior to sending it out, so parents can review the calendar more specifically. They can see it even on their mobile device. So those are just a few of the things that we do kind of in preparation before we send out the calendar itself, the survey.
To go along with your point, Mccabe, I do know that when we would send out like phase changes, Caleb would also send like a text to me saying, please check your email for something important. I mean, that could be something they could do as well.
Absolutely.
Any other questions about the calendar?
So we'll be asking you for your approval on this tonight, or on something tonight.
Okay.
We were going to propose B, of course, because it got more votes, but like Keith said, it's really what you would prefer, so.
And I don't think you have to get into the nitty-gritty about which days here or there. It could probably be a little bit more if you're looking for more of a balanced approach with the 2 semesters. Just give us that task, and then we'll go back, understanding that probably the desire to end before Christmas would then at that point not be possible. So, but it really depends on what the board wants to direct us to do.
Thank you. All right, next, COVID update. I'm going to start with just a short recap, and then we just recently had over 500 students in 23 programs tested at Timpview, and that included 1 program from Independence on Monday, and happy to report there was only 2 positives, and like Mr. Garrison says all the time, 1 positive is 1 too many. but that was still good news. Provo High will probably test their participants this coming Tuesday, and that testing is going very smoothly and very well. So thank you to all those who participate in that. It's early mornings, and there's a good dedicated group of people that do that. Teachers and staff and the community have had the opportunity to have a rapid test done in the past Thursdays. I think we're doing it Thursday and Friday this coming next week. It's been a good thing to work with the community and the health department to have opportunities for our teachers and staff and the community to go get those tests if they feel like they need it. And I think we'll continue that through February as of right now. Second dose vaccines begin this actually tomorrow, and there will be over 550 that will be administered tomorrow. And by the first week of March, we'll have vaccinated over 1,400 staff members. The numbers in the community are heading in the right direction. We need to keep steadfast with wearing our masks, washing our hands, social distancing as much as possible. So that's a good thing for the schools as we move in that positive direction. Under the new COVID manual, if a school hits the 1% threshold, we have a new option, which is called Test to Stay. And Jason Garrison, the Director of Student Services, is going to give us some more information about it.
Since I know how much Devin loves the spotlight, I thank her publicly for organizing the 126 meetings we've had on a daily basis and organizing my 30-page presentation for Test to Stay 101. Appreciate Dr. Finch for helping me take this 30 pages that I put together down to 2. Superintendent, he was pretty clear about that.
That's always a good thing, Jason. Thank
yes,
you.
sir. Yes, sir. Test to Stay, hopefully, Bonnie, do they have access to that document by chance? Okay, so I'm not going to necessarily read it to you. I'll highlight some of the areas that maybe that need highlighting, but you can take it upon yourself to read it at your discretion. What is Test to Stay? It's recommended and approved by the state and local health department as an alternative to placing an entire school on quarantine if the positive outbreak threshold meets that 1%. And as a board, in collaboration with the local health department, determines that one of those 3 options, which is outlined here, needs to be made. Those 3 options would be move the entire school that met that threshold to a remote or virtual learning for 10 calendar days. The other would be moving back to a previous phase or a modified hybrid schedule. And the third is the Test to Stay option. Test to Stay, it's about detection and prevention testing. It's an initiative that was put out there to identify, as you can see the third bullet point, identifies those who are asymptomatic and removes them from the environment. If you see the little annotation that I put there, a recent study conducted by researchers at the U.S. Center of Disease indicates that more than half of the COVID-19 infections are transmitted by those who do not exhibit symptoms. So when we are COVID rapid testing the high school extracurriculars, many of those students that have actually tested, of the students that have tested positive, many of them through their interviewing process with the contact tracing with the nurses, they weren't symptomatic. But because of the requirement to test them regardless, or showing no symptoms, they were able to detect that and get them the proper procedures and follow through, and before it became an outbreak within the school. When to test, as was mentioned, there's the CDC's return to school or school manual has identified threshold of 1% for all schools, K through 12, that are greater than 1,500 students and staff of a population. 15 positive cases, that number that we had heard at the very beginning of the onset of this, still exists for those schools that are below 1,500 of student staff. And then, of course, there can still be a classroom outbreak, but that only applies to the elementary schools. And that's 3 or more, where a entire school or classroom at the elementary level could be it could be instructed to test to stay. As one of the questions that we get, and I feel it's important that I remind you of, is who decides to test to stay. Unless it's the governor or the medical director or the state local health departments with their legal authority shutting down a school or closing a school in a response to the public health emergency, the local school board, in collaboration with the state and local health departments, will make that determination as to whether one of those three options of the modified or the virtual remote learning, modified hybrid, or the test to stay as a way to remedy that outbreak. One thing I just want to make just absolutely publicly clear is our relationship with the local health department is top notch. They provide us their knowledge, their experience, but they also come with opening ears and an opening heart to what educators and teachers have to go through as well. And they're willing to listen to all the things that go into running a school, running a district, making these decisions. So it's not always as black and white as maybe you would think in the medical profession when it comes to some of these decisions. We do look at some of the individual statistics of a school as to their case counts, start date, end date, when was their isolation started, and the amount of contact tracing that was involved, especially when it involves a program or a classroom. So we take all of that and we share that, and as a local board, you determine which of those three options needs to take place or needs to be implemented. Why test to stay? Again, I just put it real simply, 2 items. The goal is to allow our students and staff to participate, continue to participate in person learning as safely as possible, while lessening the burden of quarantine and multiple soft closures on students and their families, teachers, and school administrators. It would prevent the back and forth, in a sense, of changing phases, which we know the stress that may cause, or we've learned to have caused. And then I guess just from a statistical, science-based approach, it starts your school back at 0. It resets your numbers back to 0. That's a positive in a lot of ways. Those students have been quarantined, they've been isolated, and now your school gets a fresh start. What we know after contacting a handful of districts throughout the state, I was able to identify with them some lessons learned or some best strategies, and in this case is what we know and what we don't know but we need to prepare for. What we know is right now the test to stay, as well as the test to play for the high school extracurriculars, is funded only for high schools. So if there was an outbreak in an elementary or a middle school, then the district would assume those expenses for the cost to run and implement that test to stay at those levels. So far, out of the handful of schools that have, in the districts that have had to implement the test to stay, there's been a percent of positive students and staff ranging between 1% and 2%. So it is identifying, as shared by Board President Hall, one of the high schools tested just yesterday, I forgot what day it was, yesterday, 507 students, 23 programs, and there were 2 positives. So again, it's serving its purpose as far as identifying those that may not have had symptoms, but yet we're still carrying the virus. You look at what we also know is all the logistics for conducting these for a test to stay. I would proudly say that we've been a model of doing this for the last couple of months with our test to play with the high schools. We've had both Nebo and Alpine come and visit our opening days of testing with both Provo and Tempview to watch our process in place. Test to stay the volume would be increased, but the processes would be the same. The logistics would be the same, the layout's the same. Increased number of supplies, which we have contacted. Ms. Bryant has contacted the state. It's a 1 to 2, maybe at the longest, a 3-day turnaround to get 2,000 tests to Provo High or Tempview High if we had to do that. And the PPEs right now, I wouldn't say we're stockpiling, but we definitely have enough to get through a test. And then of course we know who to contact at the state level for that quick turnaround of maybe not reimbursement, but replenishment of those materials. And I think what we know probably better than anything else, and I can speak proudly on behalf of the safety committee, but also the district and the local health department, is that so far our aligned best practices within this district have limited the times that we have reached an outbreak threshold within a school, whether it's an elementary class or at the secondary level, and the incidents have been minimal. The interruptions have been minimal as far as an outbreak. And so we haven't really had to consider, obviously, too many times of a phase change or the implementation of a test to stay. But it's important that you're aware that that is now another option that can be implemented than changing phases. How do we prepare? Some lessons learned. A few of the districts I've reached out to, because you need a majority of your student population, staff population to test. Some of the other districts, coincidentally, North chose 80% of their population to test, and then a couple of the district below, south of us, chose 70% as their threshold of requiring students and staff to be tested. For staff, it is optional, but they are included in that 1,500 greater than, less than total. But it is optional for them, and of course we'd ask them to continue to follow the appropriate guidelines for self-monitoring and symptom checking. What else we know? Just we know how to run the process and how it works, but we would have to decide, you would have to decide, with hopefully in collaboration with the school that would have to implement this, on what would work best for them. A couple models are outlined there. Some chose to do it in a 2-day for their English classes. Some chose to do it through their advisories on a 2-day pattern with their advisories. And another school chose to do it alphabetically, one period, just in one single day. And every kid, last name A, came down for the first 15 minutes, and then it kind of just rotated through there. And so talking to the few that gave me their models, having a set period and bringing them down over a 2-day seemed to be the less intrusive for the class, because in 1 hour or period, you might have students, 3-4 different sets of students getting up different times of the day to go hit their time slot to be tested. And then they come back and cause that backside interruption. So there's a front side and a backside. Whereas if you just bring them down with a class, a set period, whether it's English, which they seem to run student IDs through maybe, or yearbook distribution, but you capture a greater number of the students that way, or through the advisories, and you split them up just based on trying to get the right numbers through. And of course, there's a makeup day that they have scheduled through there, but we have information regarding how to do all that, except how the board and the school would like to implement it at their own schools if it was ever called upon. REDCap is a data information collecting system. It's not, it's a global, it's an international information system survey provider. And so there were glitches at the onset when you had 41 school districts all trying to access this REDCap. It speaks directly to the state health department system. So parents would register their students' information, answer a few medical questions, and consent. The first month probably, as we were doing the COVID rapid testing, or the test to play, was pretty burdensome for our schools, because they were having to duplicate their efforts by having everything on a spreadsheet just for documentation purposes. But then they had to go back one by one and enter each and every kid one by one. That's been remedied since. So it would be a matter now of getting the entire school population onto REDCap. One of the lessons learned or suggestion from the schools is that you go ahead and just have it done. You start getting the communication out, send it out, and have parents start registering now, in hopes that you never have to, in hopes that you don't ever have to be, implement a test to stay. But that was the biggest bogging down of the system. There were more students waiting in a couple of lines to register and having to call parents than there were actually getting tests. And so that was one thing that as soon as they can get people registered on REDCap, that alleviated the majority of the congestion, the crowdedness, and the extra supervision that was needed. And of course, as I mentioned, the sooner we can communicate with the parents, students, staff, and about the process, about test to stay itself, about the process, and about what's needed. In this case, for parents, it's really the filling out on behalf of their student, providing a good email, because within 15 to 30 minutes, their test will be inputted into a system, just like on test to play. They hit submit, and whatever email that parent provided, they'll get the communication that it was positive or negative.
Jason, if I may, another piece of guidance that may be helpful in addition to the 70 versus 80 or some kind of number like that is whether or not the board would like us to pursue this with middle school students. I know at least one neighboring district is doing that. They're footing the bill. As we mentioned to you earlier, we do have new funding from the feds that could potentially offset this cost. I also wanted to number one, thank Jason. I feel badly about this. We're at the end of the meeting. So what I'm going to say is probably going to carry over into the next meeting, but we just wanted the board to give us their impressions about this. We didn't format this as an action item tonight for you to vote on. The board has been very trustful of the safety committee and their ability to look at data and make recommendations and move ahead in consultation with the health department. That's really what our plan would be, is to just take whatever impressions and guidance you have, filter that through, work on any additional information if there is more information required, and then make a decision at some point. So, Jason, thank you for an excellent presentation.
I think it's good information to have, but I think you'll want to wait on making a decision.
What do you mean by wait?
Once again?
You'll want to wait. Maybe I could ask a question. Would there be as much interest or need to do this in our district if that threshold went to 2% or higher?
No. Are they talking new COVID numbers?
I'm saying you'll want to wait.
Thank you.
Well, Devin, you'd have to rewrite my whole presentation. All right, but yeah. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I think I understand the code.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that what we've been talking about in the safety committee meetings, to know what our options were, so that I could understand kind of what direction you would like us to go. So, is there any more comment on the test to stay? Okay. I'm going to move the rest of this K through N to our business meeting to talk about that. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then meet back here at 7 o'clock. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Done. There we go. Foreign language. That's what's going to happen.